You're listening to the Mind Your Business podcast, episode number 86. Today, we're talking all about how to filter out overwhelm so you know what to do and when. So, stay tuned. Hi, I'm James Wedmore, and I've built a 7-figure internet business that offers the financial freedom to do what I want when I want. And I'm the first to say that hard work and hustle are not essential ingredients for your success. So, how do you build a thriving business from the inside out? This is the Mind Your Business podcast, featuring myself and co-host Phoebe Mroczek. Overwhelm. That's a big thing, isn't it?
It is a huge thing.
You know, we just had this live event. We've talked about it. We've mentioned it a few times on the podcast, BBD Live, in the beautiful Laguna Beach, California. And so many people said they've left inspired and excited and on a high. And then they get home, they lift open the laptop and they look and, oh, man. So many things to do.
Yeah.
So little time. And so that has been a question that has come up to me frequently, which is, James, how do you filter what to do? How do you know what to do and in what order? And how do you know what to say yes to versus what to say no to? And I will be a little braggadocious about this at this point, as I'm pretty good at that. I just feel like that's something, maybe it's just come with over time. Maybe it's something you develop. I don't think it's something that someone here couldn't develop or learn. But I tend to be, a machine to efficiency. I don't like wasting time. That's always still like my biggest hang up and my biggest trigger in my life and business. I'm not a fan of wasting time. And so I've really always been passionately obsessed with things like the concept of time and how to make sure that I'm not doing things that are a waste of time. And so we wanted to start talking about that because, it's like there's too much intake. There's too much you've got to go through. And I guess the way I look at it is like, it's like a funnel. It's like someone's pouring in this massive pile of to-do action items. And it's just like this little opening at the end where you're just like dripping out. Yeah. And it's like, and you've talked about that Swipes app, and it's fun for me to use that app because, and we might as well bring it up here. I wanted to turn this into a separate episode, but it's kind of popping up for me right now. And it's just something that I think is such an important practice, which is to like keep your brain like you would your home, like clean and open and clutter free. Mm-hmm. And so like there's always an idea or a to-do item or, we got to do this. And like the first thing I do is put it in there because it's a very easy, quick app. To just be like, we need to send that email out, or we need to fill out that survey, or I want to buy that new course or product. And then from there, I can always go to someone on my team or whatever and be like, hey, we should do this. But it's fascinating to watch the rate at which you cross off those in a day and the rate in which you add. And there are a lot of days where you're crossing off less than you are adding. And so you're constantly going into this to-do list deficit.
Yes.
The to-doom list. That's really when it becomes the to-doom list, because you're really in a deficit every day. And then you get into this overwhelm. And we've had another episode
number 48, and we talked about how to overcome overwhelm.
Yeah. So, this is a big topic, and that's another one we would really recommend if you're feeling that. Like, I'm going to be honest, like, I don't experience overwhelm. I experience me continuing to grow. And I've noticed that I can take on more than I used to. Like the 8-9 years ago, 3 years ago, James would not be able to handle the amount of stuff that I do today. But it's because I have the team to support. We have systems in place. We've just done it long enough. Things become easier and all that type of stuff. But there isn't a daily overwhelm. Sometimes you have experiences and moments of overwhelm. But I want to really communicate that we are not running daily from a place of overwhelm, and neither should you. That if that is the common experience throughout the day, that's not the right, we got to fix that. We shouldn't be doing that.
Well, I don't think anyone enters a conversation being like, oh, I love overwhelm. Like, everyone wants to get out of it. And I think taking a step back and being like, okay, this is how I'm feeling. And that's also what we do talk about in episode 48. So be sure to listen to that. But it's also like, how do you get out of it? And once you get out of it, you flex those muscles a little bit more. So now, you're saying that you're really good at it. I've become really good at it, but I'm a good problem solver. And I think that something that I can pull out of it is my perfectionism. I'm not great at it, but sometimes I'm like, how am I going to get there the fastest? What's going to get me, and we're going to kind of work through a couple of these things in this episode, but knowing that overwhelm is definitely, a place you don't want to be. So if you're experiencing that at the moment, we're going to help you kind of get through it.
Isn't that the irony, is that when you truly are feeling overwhelmed, like as if it's this state, not much gets done in overwhelm, right? I think we talked about that on that episode. It's like, that's probably the least productive you can be. And so ultimately, like, yes, there is like, hey, let me just do this one thing in front of me. Like right now, this week we're podcasting, and this is probably like the most overwhelmed I have, like, or the most times that overwhelm has started to like, rear its ugly head. It's almost like this like devil on your shoulder. It's like, hey, over here.
4 more episodes.
Because you're running a business and you've also blocked out half a week to do nothing but recording. And every time I just go, right, so I just got one more episode, and there's just one more episode, and that's my goal, and that's my focus. It's just, we're just batching. Then it's like, that stuff can wait, and it'll come back, and it's not going anywhere. That always helps, right? But what we want to talk about here is the filtering, because it is, chances are you're going to continue to run at a deficit with your to-do list, and we want to give permission to you to let that be your experience, because I'm always a big fan of saying you're never going to get it all done. There's always more things on the to-do list, and you have hours in the day, people on the team. Like that's another thing we've experienced, is like even building a team. It's funny when people say like, well, what? I'm afraid if I hire this person, I'm not going to have anything for them to do. And I'm like, oh, you'll find stuff. It adds up pretty quickly. And, we just added a round of 2 new hires. Their plate's already full, and we're still like, there's still a full to-do list. Like, it's not like people are sitting around twiddling their thumbs like, give us something to do, James. They're busy. So it's a constant filtering process. And that's what we want to talk to you today about, because the problem is for reals, right? Like, if I can imagine that someone coming home from a 2-day, 3-day event with me, they've got a list of all the software that they need to buy. Like, oh, I need to get, this software and that software. And then, okay, so you got to go buy it. Then you got to realize, I don't know how to use it. So you got to go learn it.
How do they sync together?
Yeah, then I got to actually set it up and start using it. And then James says I got to hire this virtual assistant, or I got to put this. So I got to go through that whole process. And then I found the person, and now I got to train the person. And they're asking me questions I don't know the answer to. And I'm also trying to do all the other work that I was already filling up my day. And, when you're trying to go in a new direction or add something new to your life, that makes it even harder, because you've already got a full day doing the thing that you've been doing, whether it was a job or business or the client work that you're doing. And now someone's like, okay, great. Now go like launch this other side business or new project or whatever. And then you got to take a course on it because you want to learn. James told me I got to learn Facebook ads, and now I'm taking a course, and I went through the whole course, and that took a week just in itself, and then I got to start learning it, but it's not the same. And now they've updated it again, and now I need a graphic designer. I don't know anything. Oh yeah, overwhelm.
Hello, that's what you look like.
Welcome. And part of it is that I've been doing this so long that. So one thing I want to say to that is, like, there's a learning curve. Okay. So just like go through the learning curve, be like, hey, I've never used this software before, and it's going to take me longer, and I got to learn it, and I'm doing it. Not why haven't I mastered something I've never used before, and why doesn't everything work the first time I ever used it? That's just, it's part of the process.
I'll say my trick is I find a glass of wine or 2 helps with the new programs.
That was step 6 in here, yeah. No, but I just feel like today there's so much software that we know forwards and backwards because we've used it for so long, and because we've just like, a lot of the stuff is just the same thing over and over again. And that's a big thing too, is people are always asking me, this is a very interesting thing, like, hey, what's the difference between this software A and software B? Or, hey, have you tried this yet? And I'm like, no. Go away.
That like bothers me so much, because you're like, in all the times, my thing is I set a timer. I'm like, I have this much time to figure out, this is how much time I can make a decision. I will spend, 20 minutes researching everything I can. And then at the end of 20 minutes, I make a decision. Or if someone I trust tells me, hey, just use this, I'm like, yep.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah. Okay. So like, I think what it is you remember when you learn the whole concept of like, that cool buzzword, early adopter? Isn't that something like everyone our age and like millennials especially like want to be identified as an early adopter? Mm-hmm. Really? Like, think about it, because all you're doing is running around chasing the newest thing, and you're chasing it when it's in its early stages, when it's buggy, when it doesn't have all the features. And like, come on, guys, like, let's grow up and drop this identity of thinking like it's cool to be an early adopter. How much cooler is it to have a software that's established, that works, that has the team behind it, it has the history behind it, and you know how to frickin' use it, and you're not jumping around to the newest and latest thing. I mean, I see so many people hop around to like, but this is the new exciting thing, and this is what's popular now, and it's like,
I've been with the same one, and it's never given me any problems.
If it ain't broke, why fix it? And so, we're going to share kind of a process I use for filtering out this overwhelm, but it's also an episode to help kind of like permeate this philosophy of being more efficient and sacred or protective with our time, because it is sacred. And that's one thing, like, as we grow, making a decision to shift software or shift platforms is such a big decision, and we don't take that lightly, because I've seen how in the past how much it slows us down, and the learning curve, and then the new systems that have to be put in place, and we just don't have time for that. It's just, there's better things to be doing, right? So yeah, there's a lot of that overwhelm, and this is about creating a filtering process. You as the visionary, as the CEO, as the leader, as the captain of the ship, you are always just steering the direction, always knowing what is the most important thing, what is the right action to take. Of course, always a book that comes up for me is Gary Keller's The One Thing. What is the one thing that, and by doing it makes everything else easier or unnecessary. It's always a phenomenal guiding filtering process. I think what has to come before that is what we're saying here is step one, which is always, and we say this a lot as well, what do you want? Clarity on the goal, clarity on the outcome. So you might have clarity on your goals and outcomes for the business, the totality of the business, and you might have goals and clarity on the financial revenue for the year and for the quarter. And then we can also break it down to the goal of the project. If this project were wildly successful, what would the outcome be? What's the goal? What are we after? A lot of times people just do something because they feel inspired to do it, which is great. Like, I want to write a book. And I always like to say, like, great. So if the book were successful, what type of results would that have for you? Like, what's the goal with the book? Why are we doing the book? What's the point? How does that connect back to everything else, that we're doing? In fact, can I share the example of the VA project you're working on?
Yeah, of
just
course.
like the general gist of this. And so this is where my filtering process starts to come in. Phoebe's really creative and always has a million ideas. I tend to not have a million ideas, and I'm kind of grateful for that. I know how to identify a great idea. I think that's the difference. Is like, I would rather be less creative and just more like that right there. That's a damn good idea. And so she shares an idea. Like, here's Phoebe and her business and what she does with, with her students and how she coaches and works with them. And then she had this totally different idea of working like kind of this like liaison connecting,
like a matchmaking
service with these VAs that she's been working with and training with entrepreneurs. And I'm like, that's its own business, and that's a distraction. Okay, so this is where part of the filtering process comes in at the goal and outcome level, because if your goal is to, work with your high-level coaching clients and to build your mastermind and keep attracting these women into this group, this is a distraction. And so that was the first thing I said to her. She's like, what do you think of this idea? And I was like, I hate it, right? That was like what I said. Like, it's stupid. It's the greatest idea ever, but it's a distraction. And so that's at this first level. The filtering out process has to do with, if you have clarity on the goal or outcome, is this going to help with that, contribute to that or not? And then what we did is we circled back and I said, well, wait a second, because it is a good idea. So the next question became, how can we make it work for your goal or outcome that you already are moving towards? And what did we come up with?
That we can incorporate it into my coaching programs and into my masterminds. This idea of having a VA associated with like as an option or as a requirement inside of my program.
Yeah. So instead of this being like, hi, I'm Phoebe and I run these retreats and masterminds. Oh, and I have a VA service. It was, wait a second. What if when Phoebe offers these masterminds and retreats, part of what they get is the experience of being connected with their own trained, high level virtual assistant that knows the stuff that Phoebe is teaching on and can just do the work. I said, now you're offering something that is blue ocean strategy. It's something that no one else is offering, and that's just extraordinary. And now we've tied it back to our goal. But we still, at that level, we have to say, okay, this is a project and this is going to take time. And we still want to filter it, look at the filtering process. So we're going to use this example through the rest of these 4 phases of what we're doing, okay? So if the goal where Phoebe wanted an X amount, a specific number of women in her retreat or her mastermind or one of her coaching offers, so she wanted a specific revenue goal, specific client goal, we have clarity there. And that becomes her primary bridge, right? We talk about, in my Business by Design training, we talk about this bridge analogy where as entrepreneurs, the shiny, object syndrome, we create 6, 7, 8 bridges, these projects that we run simultaneously. And so the thing that Phoebe would do is she said, I'm just going to work on this one bridge. I'm going to hit my goal with filling up this client number that I have. Clarity of the goal, one bridge, one focus. That's number 1. Everything now becomes around that. The filtering process is now based around either something's going to help me complete that bridge, get me to that destination, or it's a distraction, right?
I love the analogy we used on a previous episode. Is it on target or is it off target? And that for me is a very visual thing. But I remember, so when we just had that conversation, I was like, oh, facepalm moment. Because you're like, Chelsea's like, oh, I think that's a great idea. And you're like, I think it's a bad idea. I'm like, damn it.
But that can be some of the best advice too.
Absolutely.
Is like, everyone's like, I want to be surrounded by people that lift me up. And it's like, well, I also want to be surrounded by smart people that keep me on track. Because I've hung around with just like extraordinary people that will just tell me like, why are you doing that?
Yep.
Why did you do that? Oh, yeah, good point.
And I used to have that growing up with my granddad. He would always be that for me. And I would come to him with a million ideas. I'm like, I really think this is going to work. And he'd be like, nope. And this is why. I'm like, stomp on my dreams. But it was actually really great. And so that's, just having the clarity, like you were saying, having the clarity on what I'm actually out to create in my business really helps me kind of shift my focus away from all the other things, all the other, tiny little, tangent projects that I have, to figure out how can I incorporate them into my offers, or how do I just let them go and, push pause on them maybe for a later time.
Yes. Yeah. So now that we have that, we're going to move on to step number 2, which is really, I always love sharing the Stephen Covey 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Habit number 2, begin with the end in mind. And we actually did an episode just recently on one of my favorite topics, which I think is going to be a huge buzzword, effortless launching. Mm-hmm. And we talked about the concept of the MVP, the minimum viable promotion. And so when you work backwards from the goal, we really want to start at like, what is the 5%? What is the 5%? If you were to list out everything, right? Everything that would need to happen to hit this goal, and I'm going to ask you, I'm putting you on the spot. What are the 5% of activities that get you 95% of the results of this goal?
Okay, so I would need to find the 12 people.
Yes. These are the 12 women that are in the program.
Yes.
Okay, so go deeper with that, because that's a very broad thing. Like I can say, oh, I see you, I found you. What does that mean? But not just found, but what?
Okay, so I recruited them either through Facebook ads, through an ad on the podcast, or emailing my list.
Okay, so there is a specific method for finding, attracting, recruiting, and reaching out to these women and getting a yes for them to be in this group.
Yes.
Okay, so that is in the 5%. And out of that process, what is the 5% of that process?
The 5% of that process would be to create the content in which I need to launch the Facebook ads. So actually like write the content or record the videos.
Well, and here's another way to look at this, because I do feel most of the time when we ask that great question, this is a question to ask yourself at this point, once you have clarity on the goal or the outcome and you start to develop the plan, what's the 5% of those activities inside of that plan? And so I think a way to look at this and say is to say like, what is the if there was only one action you could take within that, like let's say I'd written a list of these 12 women, but you could only do one thing to, close them and get them to be a yes, what would that one thing be?
Right. Email copy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
to them.
Right.
Yeah.
So I would look at it as, what is the one thing that only I can do? And that would be writing an email and recording a video with myself on it.
Yeah. An email that makes the ask.
Yes.
Yes. So again, the way you filter is you begin to get clarity on the goal, number one. Number two, work backwards from the goal to create the plan. But within that, you're identifying the 5%. What are the 5% of activities? And it's, for Phoebe, it's finding the 12 women that I want to work with, that I know are going to be perfect fit for this, and reaching out to them directly. Everything else becomes non-essential. Yet what is most of everybody doing when they say they're overwhelmed? They're working on all the other stuff first. Because why? Why are they working on all the other stuff first?
Because it's the easy stuff.
Because it's the easy stuff. Mm-hmm. Because that's the scary thing. To write an email or to make a video and have someone come back and say no. Right? Oh my gosh, it's the end of the world, right? And that's the worst that's going to happen, by the way, is you're going to get a no. Of course, we think it's a much worse case. Like, they're going to take this email and they're going to put it all over social media and say, look at Phoebe Mroczek. Look how dare her, right? Ridiculous, stories that we come up with. But if we start with the 5%, we can begin to immediately whittle down and filter out the things that are keeping us overwhelmed. Because there's always more. There's always more things we can do on our to-do list. And notice that here's this idea again, which I told her, hey, it's a great idea, but it has nothing to do with getting these 12 people. Mm-hmm. Like, you can still close them. There's still been proof and evidence of people having masterminds, group coaching, retreats, whatever, without having this super awesome service. Now, at this point, you could also describe the offer to them in the email and say, oh, one of the things that we do that separates us is I help you build your team. In fact, I have approved VAs. Mm-hmm. And now, there might be a gap between when they say yes and pay and when you need to deliver on this. So you get the yes first, and then you go figure out how to do this. Yeah. And we love working that way, right? Is to just get paid first and figure out how to deliver it and make sure you stand in that commitment, knowing confidently that you can, right? If I gave you 30 days to attract, 5 or up to 12 or maybe 6, right? So you do like 20 hours for each one, right? Could you do that in 30 days?
For sure.
Yeah. But if you spent 30 days now trying to train those VAs and then went out to the women, you see how we work the longer, harder way.
Yeah, exactly.
Now you're kind of lazy and comfortable, and there's no real urgency, and there's no real power behind finding them. So this is a huge, huge piece to this. And this is most of it right here, is always getting clarity and looking for the 5% of activities. And here's the hint, folks. Because most people do, when you really ask the question and they're really honest with themselves, they know what those 5% are. But it's two things. It's usually the thing that is most directly attached to the sale, right? Like doing that webinar and pitching that product and having that checkout page, okay? Or it's something that's going to scare the crap out of you. If it's not scary, it's probably not in the 5%. And I do believe we all know what those things are. Okay, let's move on to the third one. We're still going to use Phoebe's example. Is that cool?
Yeah.
So now what we want to do is we work backwards. We should have a plan. We should have a series of action items. And that can be really short action items, or it can become really long, right? And so Phoebe can start to say, okay, so I'm going to run Facebook ads. What are some of the other action items you said?
So create an ad for the podcast and to email my list.
Okay, this is a relatively short amount of action items, but some people would say okay, and then I'm going to create this special interest page, and I'm going to create these videos for this, and we're going to do a retargeting campaign, and then I'm going to create a 10-part email. So, there's all these things, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of what starts to happen, is that we fill the to-do list, and it's not just because it's easy, but because it's scary to do those big things. It's something we've never done before, and so we kind of have to feel like, well, I worked for it, so I deserve this.
Right.
And that happens a lot. And so what I like to do is, as people write out these action items, I start to identify the opportunity costs, because it's just a whole nother way to really do this, is what is the cost of doing this? Mm-hmm. How much is it going to cost you? Time, money, effort, stress, etc. I think that is extremely, extremely important. And then really ask, is that worth it? Is the payoff bigger than the cost? And if not, do I really need to be doing this? And that's going to take us to part 4, where I have a series of questions that you can start to ask when you have these action items. And here they are. Does this really need to get done? Like, do I really need to do this in order to hit my goal? That's the first question. And then I think that's the most important one. And does it need to be done right now? Now, if the answer is yes, no, it does need to be done. Absolutely does. Here's one of my favorite things, and this is going to be the game changer, is do I need to be the one doing it? Mm-hmm. And there are so many times when I've trained myself out of this, so I don't have this experience as much, where you're stuck kind of doing something you don't like. It feels like molasses. I can just go like, wait a second. I can just have a VA do this. Mm-hmm. Like, why can't I have one of the guys on my team do it? And then they're like, yep, sure, here it is, done. You like fell asleep on it. Wake up the next day, there it is in your inbox. You're like, oh.
Yeah, I'm always like, who could do this better, or who else could be doing this for me? And that's why I was saying with the emails, like, I love to write my email copy, and I feel like if it's my program, I need to be on camera, which is great. And then I can just hand it over to my VA or my assistant or anyone, and they can create that page for me, in which I just plug in the copy, and it makes it really, really easy.
And then the other thing, and this is an important question to ask as well, with the filtering out process, can it be done quicker or easier? Is this the most efficient way to do it? Is there a better way? And there's, I'll give you so many examples of this, but we were using a page builder to build out one of our sales pages, and we actually started to spend a lot of time on it, and we just kept running into little snags. And it was really what we wanted to use. We're like, no, this is what we want to use. And the more we kept going down, it was like, this is becoming more and more of a nightmare. And yeah, it might take a little longer to start over on this other platform, but it's well worth it in the long run. And I'd rather have learned this lesson now to never repeat it again. For our sales pages, we use Instapage, and we freaking love Instapage. It's so amazing for, like, just if you want total freedom. Like, it's really hard if you want a template and you just want to change your headline, but if you want to create a totally custom page and it's like super long sales page, I just totally recommend it. So we're always looking for an easier, quicker way. There's a lot of times with copy, it's like, wait a second, do we got to write this, or do we have an example of this? So, like, for example, if we're doing a webinar, we have a template for the thank you page. We have a template for the reminder emails. We have a template for so many things that we don't need to reinvent the wheel. Can it be done quicker? Can it be done easier? Do we really need to do it this way? And a lot of times that we're doing it the longer and harder way is because, yes, we have some core beliefs running in the background about, worthiness or being deserving. And if I can work harder and work longer, again, this is coming from personal experience, then I will prove to the world that the money I'm going to make, I deserve this. And it's so funny. We've seen, the 48-hour film school launch was a great example of that. Yeah. Like, how much extra stuff we just added to our plate that kept us busy when the launch was it was already done. Like, we could have just pressed go and repeated it.
Right.
Instead, we found ourselves just as busy as the time when we did it the first time. Why? Because we kept adding a lot of unnecessary stuff to it. And that's why I'm such a, this is a couple of years ago, I'm so adamant about this filtering process, because there will always be more on the to-do list.
Absolutely. And when I was looking at a couple of my sales pages that I was writing myself for the Sonoma event and then for my mastermind, I realized that there was so much overlap. And I was like, why am I going to rewrite all of this stuff when I have emails that I've written that I thought were quite good? And so I just kind of copy and pasted and repurposed, recycled them onto my sales page. And I had so many comments because, not everyone reads your emails, and not everybody, reads all of your sales pages. And to be honest, nobody's going to notice if you recycle a couple words or a couple phrases or paragraphs, or mostly the whole thing. So I just copy and pasted it. And then at least I had a framework in which to work, in which to like kind of tweak. And I've said this before on previous podcasts, I'm not great at creating. I'm great at refining. And so when I just had something, I didn't have a blank page to look at. I had already words on the page, and I just went through and skimmed it and then changed it and tweaked it. And I think that's an example of getting something done a little bit quicker. And also, when I see so many people when they're trying to launch something or they're, putting out a new product, it's like, well, this is the way you do it. You do the 3-part video series, and then you do this. And this is, the 12 email sequence that everyone always does. And it's like, well, why do you do that? And is that how your audience needs to retain the information, or just understand what you're trying to sell to them. And is there an easier way to do it? Can you just do it with one video? Does it have to be a live webinar? Does it not? Can it just be, a 3 email sequence? How can you kind of streamline that entire process to make it easier and make it more efficient for you?
Yeah. And it comes back to that great example we referenced him, the 4-Hour Body, with Tim Ferriss. He talks about getting a suntan. That's the goal. I want to get tan. And so we say, wow, if I go into the sun and I lay out in the sun 10, 15 minutes, I can start to get a tan. And it's like the brain goes like, well, if I can get this much tan in 15 minutes, imagine how much tan I'll get in 4 hours. So I'm going to do that. And obviously there's this law of diminishing returns where at one point you've done much more damage, much more bad than good by staying out that long. And I think that's part of what we're talking about here when we talk about, asking these questions, if it can be done quicker, easier, is this necessary? It's just filtering out, looking at what the opportunity costs are and filtering out what's costing you more. Mm-hmm. And I want to leave everyone with another way that we filter. This has always helped me. The thing is most people don't understand the principles and fundamentals behind marketing. This is something I just so adamantly teach because I'm a principles fundamental guy. Like, I just roll my eyes at when people think that it's the latest platform that's going to build your business or the latest trend or the latest software. Just give me a break. Like, this type of stuff has been done. Internet businesses have been around for 100 years.
Right.
They have. They were called direct mail campaigns. Instead of having a sales page, you had a sales letter in the mail coming to a house. So someone had an email list. It was just called a list of physical addresses, and you would mail it. And there you would have the headlines and the body copy and the testimonials and the bonus. That was there 100 years ago, right? And, in a much different crude form, but this direct marketing has been around long before the internet. It's just always so fascinating. Bonuses, call to action, and buying something. So when you can pull back enough to see principles and these unwavering, unchanging truths, it also helps you to make the right decisions. So I like to look at things through these 3 lenses: traffic, leads, and conversions. So this is what we call the TLC method, right? So my students will know what this is, but every online business needs to be generating traffic, which means you need to get people to your stuff. There are people all over the internet all day long on their mobile device, on their tablets, on their laptops, and there are strategies, several, to get people from what they're doing onto your stuff. And then once they're on your stuff, you need to get them on your email list. You need to get their contact information. You need to turn them from a visitor into a lead, right? Traffic, leads, and then conversion or customer or sales. And that is actually the flow that you take people from traffic, leads to sales or conversions. It happens in that order, and you need a strategy for each. And when a new software pops up, or a new opportunity pops up, or new training or a new course, that's the easiest filter to use. What do I need help with the most right now? Do I need more traffic? Do I need to be working on building my list or improving my list building? Or do I need to work on increasing sales revenues and conversion rates with my customers? And then if someone comes in with this cool new fancy schmancy software or social platform, you get to say, great, is this going to help me with one of these? And there's a lot of times when it won't.
You try to squeeze it into one bucket and you're like, that does not fit right.
Yeah. And if you look at Phoebe's idea, one of the reasons why I was immediate, like, it's a distraction, not only because it doesn't align with her original driving force and goal of what she's doing, but it doesn't help her get more traffic. So like, let's say she's selling her mastermind and she decides, I also have this component I want to add to all the mastermind members that will, pair them up with a VA. Well, it doesn't help her get more traffic by having this. Mm-mm. It doesn't help her get her more leads. It can indirectly help increase conversions because she's improved the offer. But here's the fascinating thing. She can talk about the offer and say, oh, by the way, when you join, you're going to get paired up with a trained VA. And that will increase the offer. That will increase the conversions. That could increase the sales because it's a great offer. That makes it something people actually want to buy. But just doing that, just setting up the system of connecting or having the VAs staff and not doing anything else with that wouldn't do anything.
Right. On its own.
Right.
Like it's its own beast.
Right.
Yeah.
Or if people joined your mastermind and you hadn't said a word about it until the first day, hey, you guys are here and I got a surprise for you. You get your own VA. Well, why didn't you sell this? This would have made a huge selling point and increased sales and made the selling process even easier and more fun for you. So everything for me online is through that filter, traffic, leads, and conversions. And then so the last thing people would say was like, well, what about, are you saying you don't do anything for, customers? And there's two things here. The first of all, traffic, leads, and conversions is really the filter through marketing. And marketing can be seen as its own department from something such as customer support and customer fulfillment. Like if it was a big business, they would be different departments. So they would talk much more today than maybe in the olden days, but that's the primary focus. But we know that if we are providing great value, great service, and results for our customers, that is the ultimate form of marketing, that's just going to bring us more traffic, leads, and conversions. That's something that should always be a priority, but it can't be the only focus. So overwhelm is a big deal. You're not alone in feeling it. I think another thing that you have to get and realize is that people have built businesses by telling you need this. I remember Gary Vaynerchuk's message when he first came on the scene was saying that your business will die without social media. And, that's not true. Like, it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy anyways, right? Like if no one would have said that, I wonder if that would have had any truth to it at all. I mean, that's just kind of the weird things I think about. There's a lot of social platforms I'm not on and, all that stuff. But a lot of people's message and marketing themselves is saying, if you're not on this, your business will suffer. So you got to, in one level, understand we live in a world today where everyone's telling you that this is the only thing that you need, and if you don't, you're in trouble. And so what we're left with is this experience of having to need 8,000 things, and that can quickly fall away for you. That can quickly fade into the background when you understand principles, when you understand your goals, that what you're after, and having that tunnel vision to focus on nothing but that, and to be able to quickly and easily identify what is the 5% of activities that are going to have the biggest impact on this result, and then know the fundamental principles of I got to have a strategy for traffic, I got to have a strategy for converting traffic into leads, and a strategy for converting leads into conversions.
So I am always the first to say that I didn't learn that much in my master's program, which hopefully my mom does not listen to this episode. But the one thing I learned in my master's was in project management, it was all about the critical path. And that, I just remember it was like this, we had this whole software set up and it was like this big red line. And I feel like we all get so distracted by all the little lines that kind of jut out from that one single big red line. And I just always kept coming back to the like, well, what are the points along the line? And that is something that, we've kind of been trying to prove over this episode is like, what fits on that line? Stay on the line. Don't veer off, because once you start to whittle away at what really matters, what's going to get you the traffic, the leads, and the conversions, once you figure all of those things out, it's going to be so much easier, so much clearer, and you're going to be able to filter out all of the overwhelm in those little pieces that are kind of jutting out. So my advice is stay on the red line.
Yes. So thank you so much, everyone, for listening to this very special episode. I'm James Wedmore.
I'm Phoebe Mroczek.
And we'll see you in the next one. Take care. Are you frustrated that no matter how hard you hustle, no matter how much you get done in a day, you still feel like you have little results to show for it? Do you feel like you're doing everything right, but there's still something missing? Well, what if there was an easier way? What if your business could be fun, effortless, and profitable? Phoebe and I have put together a free audio MP3 for you, compiling the 77 business affirmations for creating success from the inside out. And we want to give it to you absolutely free. This is your chance to rewire your brain for bigger results in your life and your business. To get instant access absolutely free, simply visit 77affirmations.com. That's the number 77affirmations.com.